Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. Let's see what happens. So before watching the show, a lot of you sent me this video on the YouTube channel called Roxy Says, and she is reading some of the posts made by Uche, I believe. So let's check it out.
Someone asked, did you cheat on Lydia? Uche says no, Lydia and I were never together. We dated for a short time and were both seeing other people. In the cast process, we were asked to disclose who our most recent relationships were. If she believed we were in one, she would have disclosed mine.
In the casting process, we were asked to disclose who our most recent relationships were with. Okay, most recent. If she believed we were in one, she would have disclosed my name or photo, and the producers wouldn't have allowed both of us on the show. He's not really answering the question. He's diverting to this other, but it's still interesting for us to hear. Okay, so according to him, he's saying that he never cheated on Lydia because they never had an exclusive relationship. And certainly the way they both talked about their relationship, it seemed like that was a possibility. We also heard their conversation between Uche and Lydia where Lydia was saying, remember that thing I found in your drawer, which we still don't know. It sounded like cheating, I think. I don't know. So maybe he was like, look, I could be with other people because I'm not exclusive. But then he also gave the impression that they were exclusive, or I don't know. It's just a lot there. And then he says that the casting process asked to disclose our most recent relationships. Why would it be just recent? To me, if you're really trying to make Love is Blind, then you have to ask people to disclose not only every person they've ever dated, but every person they know, right? Because that's the whole point. If you know what someone looks like, then that negates it. You can also tell other people what someone looks like or what their life is like. You would have to know every coworker, every acquaintance. Why just recent relationships? What does recent have to do with anything? What if you dated someone in high school or college? Suddenly that's okay? I mean, of course it's not okay. It just seems like you would want to ask that. I've heard that people on season 2, I think Natalie and Deepti had disclosed on their podcast that they were never asked to disclose their recent relationships or anything. So maybe they just say, well, we'll roll the dice and, we'll do a little bit of vetting on Instagram, but chances are they're not going to know each other. And I suppose that's true, but still, it just seems you would ask. Anyway, so Uche is saying they did ask, and he believed that they weren't in a relationship. But what does relationship have to do with it? If you know what someone looks like, they should ask not just who have you dated? Tell me everyone that you have made out with in the past 5 years or something. What is, if they just say relationship, then you could see someone like Uche saying like, well, I wasn't in a relationship with Lydia. We dated off and on or something. We hooked up a few times. So I mean, it certainly didn't sound like that, the way he described it to Aaliyah, right? But I don't know. Anyway, so that's what he's saying.
Do you really think Lydia followed you there? Uche says 100% confirmed.
So he's already said this on the show, and I would love to know his evidence. And it's just funny, because usually when you know someone who's a lawyer, I have friends who are attorneys or judges, and we'll make jokes about things like, okay, judge, what is your verdict on these French fries? To me, I don't find that they act like judges or attorneys, or for that matter, myself, I don't act like a therapist. Some people imagine that I would, but if you hung out with me socially, you would not think I was even close to the field of psychology. I mean, it's not that I'm like the opposite, but I don't talk about that kind of stuff. It just is what I do at work, and maybe it's integrated into kind of my philosophy of life. But anyway, so I think it's interesting though that Uche actually kind of comes across like a lawyer, the way he litigates these points to Milton and to Lydia and to others. One of the things about attorneys is that they will advocate for their client and spin things in a very firm and confident way. And that's what you want your attorney to do when they're fighting for you, right? You don't want them to be ambiguous. If you're going to convince the jury or the judge, the trier of fact, then you have to be very firm and you have to believe, right? And so when he says stuff like this, given his track record, we don't know. We don't know what that means. 100% confirmed. If Chris said this, Chris and Johnny, if Chris said something like 100% confirmed, given Chris's track record, I think we would be more likely to believe him. But with Uche, it's just hard to know. So he says, I brought up Instagram because this was the method. More on this later. Okay, well, maybe we'll get more details later. I mean, it seems possible, right? Given Lydia's personality, given that it seems that Lydia did consider Uche to be a past relationship and that she didn't disclose it. But, I don't want to believe that someone would do that, honestly. So I am hoping that the evidence that he has is dubious.
His takeaway from having been on Love is Blind, and has it changed your way of dating? Uche says, I've learned that the tone of my message is just as important as the content.
Okay, so that's good. Has he truly learned that, or what? He says also, I came in on the second day of the pods and told my dates at the time that I wanted to discuss my biggest personality flaws. I said mine is that sometimes I'm too blunt and direct, and it's something that I'm trying to improve on. So please be patient with me and point out when I do it so I can correct it. I regret this self-awareness is not shown. Okay, that's actually pretty good. We don't usually get that from cast members. And he is, when I talk about apologies, a big part of an apology, a big part of taking responsibility is doing something like this. Often these public apologies, people will say like, I take full responsibility for what I have done. I apologize for that thing that happened. Instead of actually giving evidence that you are, quote unquote, taking responsibility. What he's doing right here, even though he's not actually apologized, or he's not saying I'm sorry, this is actually closer to an apology than that non-apology that I role played earlier. He is saying, I have a flaw and I've known about this and I'm trying to work on it. And I knew about it going into the pods, and I regret my self-awareness on the show. I am clearly doing that thing again, and I regret that, and that is on me. There's nothing in there about, sure, I have this flaw, but this other person triggered me, and da-da-da. He's just saying, I have this flaw. That's it. Full stop. That's good.
Asked, would you have stayed? And he said, I got conflicting information on what was going on during the pods. Watching it back, I think Aaliyah was brave for staying as long as she did. I would have 100% left too, and I don't fault her for that. I just wish it had been communicated to me.
Yeah, that's actually what I was wondering about, because as Uche was being confused or criticizing Aaliyah, I'm thinking, well, Uche doesn't know what we know. And I am often talking about this, of mentalization. We have to be able to put ourselves in other people's minds. We have to try to understand someone else's perspective, where they're coming from. This is an important part of empathy. It's an important part of relationships, and it's an important part of politics and understanding privilege and oppression, to understand where someone is coming from, how they were raised, what they know, what the premises they're operating. And I was looking at Uche, and my initial reaction to him was to be critical of his reaction to Aaliyah leaving the pods. But then I was thinking, well, but he doesn't know what we know. I know what Aaliyah was going through. He knows what Aaliyah was going through with him, and that had resolved pretty well by just before she left the pods. And we know, though, that Aaliyah and Lydia had a very interesting relationship, and that's what he's saying right here. He's saying, after watching the show, I now realize what Aaliyah was going through, and I totally understand why she left. I just wish she would have told me, which is another thing that I was saying earlier. It's like, yeah, it wouldn't have been much effort to, at the very least, write him a note. Now, in the end, I think Aaliyah is happy that things worked out the way that they did, because I'm guessing that Aaliyah, after watching the show and experiencing Uche after the pods, wouldn't want to be with him anyway. So it's not like some big tragedy happened. They were seemingly getting along really well, but then we saw stuff afterwards.
Someone asked, why did you tell Aaliyah it was over? Was she not what you expected looks-wise? And he said, the "it's over between us" is a post-production soundbite. At lunch, we both forgave each other. We held hands and shared our first kiss. Then we agreed to date outside of the show.
What? Is this another one of those things? What? Oh my God, really? Oh my God. That is... Yeah, okay, so what he's saying is at the lunch at the restaurant when they met up with the puffy sleeves, they actually decided to date and they kissed there, and that's interesting. So Uche went there to demonstrate to her about Lydia, and they somehow worked it out. I mean, it seemed like it was kind of heading in that direction. And then he's saying it's over between us is something that they added in. So let's rewatch that.
You know, you got into a fight with Lydia. You kept on saying, oh, you left because of her and because you couldn't deal with that situation. But the real reason is...
Okay, so I don't know, but given my knowledge of audio and recording and how to record scenes like this in public, there are a couple things we can talk about. One is that you can hear music and you can also hear room noise. So those two things can be used to cover up edits. So when you are recording a scene like this, they have lapel mics on, and you typically won't get a lot of room noise from those lapel mics, because those lapel mics, typically the kind of pattern they have, once you get further away from the mic, the volume quickly drops off. They design them that way, of course. And so one of the ways in which you can hide the edits is that you have everyone be quiet and you just record the room with a room microphone that picks up on all the ambient sounds. You can kind of hear it. I'll replay it and you can hear it. And when you have that playing, it will hide edits, because in edits you can hear these little anomalies or changes in timbre of the voice and that kind of thing. The other thing is they have music, so that can also be used to hide those edits.
You didn't have confidence in me, and you didn't have confidence in our relationship. I think it's over between us.
Okay, so I wouldn't have thought about that at the time, but that is said off camera. Why would they not show him saying it? Whenever anyone is talking in this conversation, they will actually have the camera on them. Why would they not show him actually saying that in that moment? And yeah, and it also, I don't know if I'm just reading into it, but it also sounds like it is said in a different timbre, a different moment, right? It sounds, there's different energy in his voice. So let's compare. I feel like this is a forensic scientist. You know, what is it? We're on CSI, Love is Blind. Let's watch.
With that situation, but the real reason is you didn't have confidence in me, and you didn't have confidence in our relationship.
So in the restaurant, the way he's talking, it feels kind of broken, almost like he's about to cry. I don't think he is about to cry, but there's that quality of his voice. And then when he says it's over between us, it feels like it's from a different energy place. Now, is it possible to suddenly shift energies in your voice? Absolutely, but it does lend itself to Uche's claim.
I think it's over between us.
Yeah, it just sounds a little different. Plus, if you're trying to deceive the audience, one way to do it is you will have the camera on her when she's talking. You have the camera on Uche when he's talking. And then they went back to her, and then they went back to him, and then they went back to her, and then the voice. So let's rewatch.
I think it's over.
Then the voice. Why would you do that? That's bad editing. If you had him on camera, just include that clip. But yeah, yikes. Okay, so why in the world would production do this? With Jackie, you can imagine why they do it, because they're looking for drama. They're looking for someone to hate. But I don't think people would have hated Jackie that much less than that. There was a lot of anger at Jackie to begin with, so I don't feel like you needed that. That was why they did that. They edited Jackie poorly because they're trying to make her look bad, because you get more viewership or more entertainment value when there's someone to really hate. And with Uche, I guess maybe that's the reason why they did it with him too, maybe, that he is rejecting her when she's all dressed up and asking, to be. So if the reality situation is that they actually made up here and they started to date, why would they not just film that? And where did that clip come from when he said that? Presumably it came from, did they film them? And then maybe he'll get into it. Did they film them like Zach and Bliss and then they eventually broke up? So we can imagine a situation in which Aaliyah and Uche decided to date. They filmed that as well. And then maybe they don't go on to become engaged. And maybe their relationship is sort of on and on again, off again. And maybe even they decided to opt out of being filmed after a while. I'm just speculating. And then after a while, off camera, they break up. And then after everything is filmed and the people are trying to edit it together to tell a story, they're thinking, okay, well, the Aaliyah, Uche, Milton, Lydia foursome is one of the main cores of our show. So we have to have some resolution, but we don't have that with Aaliyah and Uche. We don't have that on camera. So how do we tell the story with what footage we have that basically has the essence of the story, but is actually not in the events that had happened? And they're like, well, we know that they broke up, so we'll just say they broke up here. Maybe we'll just do that, right? And yeah, or they wanted Uche to look worse or something. I just wish that if it is true that this is fabricated, which it seems like it is, then they would have just filmed what they had and showed it. And then they just have one of those title cards that just says, by the way, they opted out of filming or whatever, and they later broke up. Or we don't know what happened to them after that they dated and they didn't get engaged. So we don't know what happened to them. They will no longer be in future episodes. So, and you have them, and then you have them at the reunion or something, and they can give an update. So, yeah, I guess the best hypothesis is that they wanted Uche to look bad and rejecting, and if he actually did go out with her, then that would give him a little bit of positive vibe around him. And yeah, I guess in terms of the scale of the shenanigans and the deception, it's not like really high, right? But it's an interesting detail that they decided to date. I remember thinking when I was watching this scene that I thought, well, Uche would be kind of dumb not to. And so that really rewrites that story, because I remember thinking, now that you know this, at least there's a possibility of that you and Aaliyah would work out, right? So it seems like it would be logical to give that a shot. But then we're thinking, okay, well, but Aaliyah doesn't show up to that one party that they have with all of them. Or maybe she was there, but she just wasn't in frame or something, or they had AI like remove her. Yeah, that'll happen eventually, right? Anyway, so I remember thinking, why would you not date her? Because now that you know all the information and you're hearing from her saying, I do want to be with you, why would you not date her? Because just a few days earlier, you were ready to marry her. You were ready to spend the rest of your life with her. And just because this one thing happened, which, it was a big thing, but it's a weird situation because you're in the pods. You're not going to have that situation again. Why would you not give it a chance? And then because he didn't date her here, I remember wondering, is he involved in shenanigans? Did he go on the show in a honest way? Did he actually move towards proposal with Aaliyah in an honest way? Because if you were that much in love with this person, why would you just reject them now in this situation? So, yeah, interesting.
I understand.
It's masterful, the editing, right? Like, he says that, and then she has that face, and given that he didn't actually say that, like, how did they get that bit where she says that? It just matches up perfectly. But we'll rewatch it again and notice that it's her, then him, then her. He says something, back to him. He's not saying anything, back to her. Why would you not have him? Let's rewatch.
I think it's over between us.
Right? It doesn't make any sense that you would edit it that way. Either it's a really bad edit, like someone just completely dropped the ball, or it is shenanigans. The room noise seems particularly loud because the restaurant does not look busy. But if you listen to that room noise, it sounds like a fairly busy restaurant. I can't know that, of course, but it stands to reason. The music is maybe they play music. I don't know how often they play music in situations like this. I think they usually do, but it's awful. And I'll say this again, that when a show like this lies to you, then you start wondering, is anything real? And we, as the viewers, need to believe that some of this is real. Otherwise, it's just a badly scripted TV show.
Of his blind reporting. So the first couple up is Renee and Carter. These two made it through the pods. They got engaged. They went to Mexico. They moved in together, and we didn't see any of it.
Yeah, I heard something about this, and I actually talked with the producer on the show that I talk with, and she says that she doesn't know about this situation, but she was saying that every season there have been couples that have been excised from the edit. Every season there's a couple that either gets engaged and then goes on the trip and might even go to the altar, and they might actually cut them out of the show, or they get engaged and they don't actually decide to follow them. Apparently they have to whittle them always down to 5 or 6 couples, maybe because of cost reasons or something. But every season that they will say, hey, I know that, so we have 8 couples that are all engaged. We're only going to work with these 5 or 6. And for you 4 over here that got engaged, feel free to live your life and have fun. And what the producer was saying is that every couple that is not invited, into the later stages of the show, even though they are engaged, none of those couples ever got married, and most of them never even date after getting out of the pods, which, and I don't know the validity of that claim, but if that's true, then that demonstrates that the production is able to detect those couples that are on the show just for clout, right? That they get engaged, and then knowing that they're not going to continue, then their relationship just, disappears. And who knows? But that's the claim. So we're hearing about these 2 individuals, that they were not involved. And I have some back channel information too about him that I might share.
I see here that Renee and Carter actually did file for a marriage license, but it was not returned, meaning they did not get married. However, Renee is currently married. So 9-10 months after walking down the aisle and saying no to somebody, she got married to somebody else.
Okay, who knows what that means? They could have, in good faith, planned to get married and then got on the altar and decided to say no, one of them. And then she met someone and gets married 10 months later. Okay, that happens. It's also possible, and I'm sure people think this, that she wasn't on the show for legitimate reasons. Maybe she even had another relationship. I mean, is that what people would think, that she actually had a partner before going on the show? That doesn't seem likely, but it could be.
Entire story was completely cut from the show. So allegedly, the guy that Renee is currently married to was her boyfriend during this entire experiment. And here's a pic of her in Mexico with her golden goblet. And they also got a glimpse of Carter in Mexico as well.
Okay, so they are showing pictures demonstrating that they were on the vacation, the getaway thing. And the claim is that she had a boyfriend prior. It's possible that she had a boyfriend, they break up, she goes on the show, they rekindle after the show. There's a story in which she has a breakup with this guy, she goes on the show, she's like, hey, I really want to meet someone. She legitimately dates someone, she goes to the altar, she's like, yeah, I'm not feeling it. And then kind of like an ultimatum situation, right? Like the TV show. And then afterwards, she's like, you know what? That last relationship, that was so much better than this one. And then she goes back. Who knows? It'd be hard to imagine someone having, 2 people that are in a relationship. And then she's like, hey, they're inviting me to be on this reality TV show. I'm going to go on this reality TV show and publicly make out and potentially sleep with this other random guy. And then I'm going to come back to you and then we'll get married. I don't know. It doesn't seem likely. It's possible. It doesn't seem likely, though. God, I hope that's not the situation.
Engaged. So next we have Estefania and Jared. Apparently those 2 did not go to Mexico, and word on the street is they're no longer together. I would have also liked to see this couple.
Okay, so I heard from people that there were 2 couples that were cut out of the show. And I also heard and started reading an article that someone sent me. One of y'all sent me an article about allegations of a sexual assault that happened while filming the show. Okay, so this is on people.com and is written by Joelle Goldstein. Okay, so one of the cast members was Tran Dang. She is suing production, claiming that she was sexually assaulted on set by her former fiance, I think meaning her fellow cast member, and the production company did nothing to stop it. That's what she is saying. Okay, so I don't think that was either of the individuals that we heard of. So was there a third couple that went on the getaway? Okay, so according to the complaint, Tran Dang says that she was aggressively recruited by Kinetic's casting team to appear on season 5. Though she did not seek involvement, she eventually agreed to join the show. What does that mean? According to her, she's saying she was aggressively recruited, okay, and though she did not seek involvement on the show, she eventually agreed to join the show. What does that mean? That she feels like she was coerced to be on the show? Is that possible? I mean, it's possible, but okay, going on. During filming, the suit alleges the cast was intentionally sequestered for 2 weeks in the pods without use of their cell phones, passwords, wallets, or communicative devices. Well, yeah, that's being on the show, right? Maybe that was surprising to her. Now, who knows? In the complaint, they could just be laying out the background. It's hard to know exactly what this communication was, but these first two things sound like, well, yeah, you're on a reality TV show. I'm sure it was explained to you anyway. But going on here, so I just want to say up front that when people come forward with allegations of themselves being victimized by sexual assault, generally speaking, those individuals were actually assaulted, because for people to come forward, there's so many barriers. There's so many barriers in the system. There's so many barriers that have been internalized by all of us. We've absorbed a lot of culture telling us that we're at fault. We should be ashamed of ourselves. It is, quote unquote, potentially easier to just sweep it under the rug. Of course, you suffer as a victim from that, but there's not the hassle of having to go to the police or tell people, or if it was someone that you knew and you're in a circle of friends, you would challenge everyone around you to figure out what happened, because if it was true, then they have to reject that person. If it's not true, then they have to reject you. There's a lot of consequences to coming forward. There are times when you become more victimized because you come forward. And of course, the perpetrator might target you with more abuse, maybe physical violence if you come forward. So there's a lot of barriers to coming forward. And when people do come forward, which is a rare event, by the way, generally speaking, those individuals were legitimately assaulted. That isn't to say that people aren't lying or distorted at times. It's rare, but there are cases seemingly where that happened. And that's another part of this, is that in a lot of these cases, we will never know because the data is just not available. We don't have a videotape, for example. People are telling us their accounts, and we just have to sift through that. And a lot of times, especially just reading news or hearing accounts on the internet, we'll never know. We'll never have firm data to be able to say which way or the other. Now, there are different approaches to acknowledging your ignorance, my ignorance. One way of doing it is to say something like, well, we don't know, but it sounds credible. And generally speaking, when people are coming forward, they are telling the truth, but I don't know. Okay, that's what I'm basically saying, and that's one version. Another version you'll hear people say is, well, we don't know, innocent till proven guilty, so everyone shut up about it. And that approach, which is sexist or anti-victim approach, is kind of in the same ballpark of what I'm saying. Both of these positions were saying we don't really know, but you hear the difference, right? I'm saying, well, we don't know, but generally speaking, when people come forward, they are telling the truth, and we should be sensitive to that, but we don't know. The other version is, well, we don't know, so innocent until proven guilty, so everyone be quiet about it. Or, there's a lot of people that lie about it, right? It kind of depends on what you emphasize, right? And this second way of saying it is also acknowledging the confusion and the lack of data and the uncertainty, but it is also used as a weapon against victims in general, right? And that's what I'll say about that. The other thing to acknowledge is that in this case, she claims that she was assaulted by her fiancé, someone that she might have consented to have physical contact with prior. Who knows? But at least someone that she was in a relationship with. And there's a lot of myths out there. And one of the myths is that you can't be assaulted by your partner. People, one, believe that could never happen, or two, they think, well, you're engaged, so you can't claim that because he has rights to your body, that kind of thing. Okay, so going on with the report. So this is her account. Over multiple days of filming, production provided the cast members with alcohol, but limited food. Okay, yeah, we've heard that before, which is not okay. While on set for up to 18 hours per day, production required Ms. Dang to request permission to do virtually anything, including using the restroom. She was prohibited from leaving her hotel room without express permission and kept under 24-hour surveillance. Okay, so when you read that, it sounds bad, right? But when you understand the premise of the show and how these sort of productions work, it doesn't sound bad at all to me. The assault could be actually still legit, but these claims seem dubious to me. She's saying while on set for up to 18 hours per day. Okay, you're kind of on set 24 hours a day in a sense, but meaning that you're sequestered for 24 hours a day. She says, while on set for up to 18 hours per day. Okay, so let me just chime in here. I talked with my person behind the scenes. I asked her a lot of questions about how everything is filmed and how everything works. And I don't know if any of this is true, but here's what I was told. That for the pods, which is 10 days, the cast members generally are in the pod warehouse because all the pods are in a giant warehouse because there's all this equipment outside of the pods, right? There's all the cameras and the audio stuff and the monitors and hundreds of employees, and you got to have cafeterias or, at least a lot of food out for people to eat, and not only for the cast, but also for the workers, and you have bathrooms and you have parking lots, it's just a lot of stuff. And so what she was saying is that the cast will film generally from something like 9 to 7 or something like that. The cast are required to be there for something like that, something like 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. or something, or maybe earlier, but something like that. Then if the cast wants to date in the evening, then they can if they want to, which I think a lot of the cast members that actually find a connection opt to do, so they can hang out. They don't want to go back to their hotel and be bored. They want to, hang out with their person. So a lot of the cast will opt in to have the night dating, if you will. And she said that the workers go home and a night shift actually arrives for that later filming stint. Okay, so going on. So she said, while for 18 hours, okay, the production required Ms. Dang to request permission to do virtually anything, including using the restroom. So another thing that I learned is that since the production is in this warehouse and the bathrooms aren't necessarily in the pods, when a cast member has to go to the bathroom, they have to just say something when they're in the pods. They just say, hey, I have to go to the bathroom. And then they will send a runner out to take them to the bathroom because the warehouse is so giant and dark. Apparently, it's giant and dark outside of what we see, right? We see the different pods and the lounges, but it's this vast open warehouse where they're shooting all this. And to get to the bathrooms, it's actually confusing, and people will get lost sometimes. Even the workers will get lost trying to find the bathrooms. And they don't want the cast members to accidentally find their way to the other side or even nefariously work their way to the other side and mess up the entire show, right? So they have to have a runner or someone who works there to actually guide them to the bathroom. And you can imagine that at times maybe it takes a while for the worker to get to you and da-da-da-da-da. So, yeah, I mean, that would be bothersome that you'd have to be like, okay, I have to go to the bathroom and I have to have a babysitter walk me to the bathroom. But, you can understand why that would be going on. She says she was prohibited from leaving her hotel room without express permission and kept under 24-hour surveillance. Okay, well, what does 24-hour surveillance mean? Does that mean that she had cameras in her bathroom, or does that mean that they were just making sure she was staying in her hotel room, which you could imagine that would be important for the show? Now, the way it sounds, she's a prisoner, but I'm pretty sure that all someone has to do is say, I want to go. I want to leave the show right now from wherever you're at, in the pods, in the hotel, whatever. I'm pretty sure they would do that, because the lawsuits that would come down on this show if they imprisoned somebody, right? Now, I don't know, maybe that's possible, but she's not saying that. She's not saying, I asked to leave and they tied me to the bed, or I asked to leave and they threatened me with a lawsuit or something. You know, she's not saying that. She's just talking about how she was prohibited from leaving her hotel room. Now, again, if I read the allegation, you know, this is a full document. It's possible that she's just using this as background and then she gets to the actual assault, but I'm just chiming in on what I'm hearing here. Okay, so then it says, during her time in the pods, she got engaged to fellow participant Thomas Smith. Then it says, the two of them flew to Mexico, where she alleges she was sexually assaulted by Smith on May 3rd, 2022, while filming was going on. Okay, so trigger warning, this is going to describe exactly the allegation, so skip forward a bit if you don't want to hear this. The document says that he, without her consent, forcefully groped her, exposed himself in the nude, and repeatedly made sexual contact over her express objections. Yikes. And then it says, because production surveils the cast 24 hours a day, most, if not all, of these traumatic acts were likely captured on film. Okay. I do know a bit about this as well, that unlike Ultimatum, they don't actually put those cameras in the corner of the room. So the way it sounds like the cameras were not in the room with her, right? The cameras show up, they film scenes, and then they leave. And they don't have those cameras in the corner, from what I understand. I don't know if that's true. I'm not there, but that's my understanding. And you imagine if they did have those, they would show it like they do with Ultimatum. So the way this is written, it sounds like she's saying, because if the cameras were there while she was being assaulted, she would say something like, and the camera crew was there, so it is on camera. There is a document of this event. She's not saying that. She's saying, you know, because production surveils us for 24 hours a day, then it's likely that most, if not all, of these events were captured on film. Or is she saying that she was assaulted several times and that maybe some of them were when the cameras were obviously there and other times when they might have been there? Is that what she's saying? And then it says, she allegedly reported the incident, presumably to production, but according to the suit, an assistant producer gaslit her, implying that she was at fault for the assault because she didn't communicate effectively or somehow she didn't take the relationship seriously. Wow. I mean, if that's true, yikes. That is truly awful. Again, people don't usually come forward unless they are actually assaulted. If it did happen, yeah, that would be really rough, right? Okay, so I'm just imagining what she might have gone through. I don't know what happened, of course, but this is just a possibility that she goes in the pod, she meets someone, she falls in love, she gets engaged, she goes to Mexico for the getaway, and then at some point she starts to not want to engage with him and is either saying directly or giving signals, and he is being aggressive, and she is confused. She is engaged to this man. She wants to marry him. She's in love. She doesn't know what to do. She feels icky about it. She doesn't have her cell phone, remember, because I believe when they go to the vacation spot, they still don't have their ability to communicate with the outside world. So you're kind of trapped. You're dependent on the producers. You actually reach out to the producers. You tell them something, and they blame you or tell you that it's all your fault or something. And what do you do? Where do you go from there? You're stuck. It's like the movie Get Out or something. You're like in this science fiction movie where you're stuck in this world being assaulted, and the powers that be are a part of it, and you have zero power. You have no way of communicating with the outside world. That would be truly terrifying and traumatic. So if that happened as the way she's describing it, then yeah, pretty awful. Okay, then people reached out to Chris Colin. the showrunner or the creator of Love is Blind. And basically he's saying that that would never happen because we train the production team to respond to those kinds of allegations very quickly to create safety for the cast. And the allegation that she was falsely imprisoned, he's saying, is preposterous because you can come and go whenever you want. Well, I can't imagine that you can just come and go whenever you want. I think you can go whenever you want, but I don't think you can go and then come back, right? Okay, so that's the end of that article. Maybe there will be more articles to read, more developments to the story. There often isn't, strangely, in situations like this, to me. But if you come across anything, send it my way. I'm very curious as to what happens.
Of their love story, but this couple is Paige and Josh. So Paige and Josh got engaged. They didn't go to Mexico, and apparently Netflix dropped their story after the pods. But the tea with these two is that they were rumored to know each other before they got on this show. So remember when I did that video of People magazine interviewing Chris, the showrunner for...
Okay, so, who knows? This is rumor, but interesting. Yeah. Well, I remember actually saying something like this. I was thinking about Uche and Lydia, and I thought, like, why would you do that? Why would you go on the show if you knew each other? That's just such a waste of time. But then I thought, well, actually, it would be a way to get a free wedding. You go on the show, you fall in love, and you become famous because you're on a TV show, and you don't have a lot of problems because you already know each other pretty well. Or maybe there'd be more problems because of that. And then you get a free wedding out of it and everyone wins. But it would be so hard to pull off because all of your friends, all your family members, everyone would have to continue lying about it, right? But maybe most people don't look up information after the show. They just watch the show and move on with their lives. But anyway, the allegation is that one couple actually went on and they were already in a relationship. Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, let's adjourn there. Tune in next time when I continue watching. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.